Hi, I'm Tony Guerra. I teach college pharmacology, and I created the free Pharmacology Course podcast to help you recognize, understand, and memorize pharmacology and drug names on the go. This first 7-lecture series provides a basic understanding of how to recognize common drug names, understand the basic classifications, and quickly memorize them for exams. The print, ebook, and audiobooks these lectures are based on, Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach, can be found in the show notes taking you to audible.com. If you've never had a book from Audible, you may be able to get the 7-hour professionally narrated version for free. Please do take the time to subscribe, rate, and review these episodes. It helps other people find out about them. Welcome to episode 5, Neuropharmacology.
Okay, let's go over chapter 5, Neuro, of our review. So let's start with local anesthetics, and these are OTC. And what a local anesthetic is, it's just something that's going to numb a certain area. Anesthetics, when injected, will make a person pass out. But what I want to talk about is the ester versus the amide. So benzocaine is an ester. It's a type of organic chemistry molecule. And that tells you that the esters we don't really want to inject because they can become allergenic, where a patient might have an allergic reaction. Lidocaine has less of that allergenicity, but they're both related by this caine stem, C-A-I-N-E, and that might look like cocaine, and that's right because cocaine was one of the original anesthetics, and they found or developed some anesthetics that weren't addicting. But if you look at Ambisol, you see 2 of the letters from the word numb, so that's one way to remember that one. And then Solarcaine. Solarcaine takes the caine ending. That's still frowned upon by the World Health Organization. But solar meaning sun, so we're using something to take care of the pain from a sunburn. Okay? But lidocaine has many uses, an injectable in an emergency, patch, some other different things that it can be used for. OTC, anti-vertigo, so meclizine. If I were to do meclizine in small letters, like this, M-E-C-L-I-Z-I-N-E, you could kind of put this C and this L together to make a D, and then you see dizzy, so it's for dizziness. But the brand name's Dramamine that you might know. But there was also a brand name that was a prescription item, Anti-Vert, for anti-vertigo. But that one told the whole story, anti-vertigo. Another OTC under neuro would be a sedative hypnotic. And we see diphenhydramine. And you might say, well, I remember that one, but that was an antihistamine, you told me. And that's what's kind of infuriating about pharmacology is that things can be for, prescription drugs can be for many different things. All this is OTC. But diphenhydramine, as an adverse effect, made someone drowsy. But here we're using that side effect as a good thing. So Tylenol, acetaminophen, diphenhydramine, the antihistamine that makes you tired, Tylenol PM. And that PM means post-meridian, after, literally afternoon, but we just use it at nighttime. So Tylenol PM is something used at nighttime. Sometimes sleep is disturbed because of pain, and that's what the acetaminophen is there for. Benzodiazepine-like sedative hypnotics. Now we're going to the prescription items. And benzodiazepine-like means it's not a benzodiazepine, but it works a little like one. So S-zopiclone with the clone stem. And we see this S again, so the S isomer. And you can think of Luna or rest in Lunesta. And then zolpidem, pidem is the stem, P-I-D-E-M. Okay? And this is Ambien, or Ambien CR, ambient controlled release. So Ambien works to help somebody fall asleep. But if the person has trouble staying asleep, the controlled release, much longer acting version, works well. Melatonin receptor agonist, so Remeltion. The meltion is the stem, and it looks like melatonin for a reason, because it is a melatonin receptor agonist. And you can think of rosarum. Rose rhymes with doze, REM for rapid eye movement sleep. So a lot of hints in these brand names, certainly worth remembering. Okay, so those are some OTC neuro drugs, something to help you sleep. In the next column, we're going to go into antidepressants and how those can help us. The first thing that throws students off is the classifications: SSRI, SNRI, TCA, MAOI, and each one has its own acronym. So an SSRI is a selective serotonin reuptake. I didn't think about space there. Inhibitor. Okay. And that means that serotonin is going to normally be reuptaken, or if you want to think of it as recycling, that's maybe a better way. But instead what happens is we inhibit that recycling, it stays in the synapse, and it's supposed to make the patient happier. It's that hypothesis of norepinephrine and serotonin not having enough of it. Okay. So there's 5 of them I'm going to go over. Citalopram and S Citalopram. We see 2 drugs with the same root, just like we saw esomeprazole and omeprazole. Celexa was the first one that came out. It reminds me of Relax. These SSRIs can also be used for anxiety. And then Lexapro, you can think of a professional upgrade from the first one. So it takes the ending of Celexa and then just adds pro to make Lexapro. But those are related, and the S-citalopram is supposed to be better than the citalopram. The trilene stem for Zoloft, so it lofts your mood. And then the oxetine. So oxetine is a little bit tricky. The Adopted Names Council calls oxetine a fluoxetine-like entity, but fluoxetine and paroxetine are SSRIs. Then we're going to see that duloxetine is an SNRI, and later we're going to find a non-stimulant ADHD medication, atomoxetine. So this oxetine ending you really have to be careful with. Fluoxetine is interesting. It's got 2 brand names. Prozac was the first brand name that came out. It was an antidepressant. It sounds like a strong drug with the P, the Z, and the C, or with a K sound. And then Seraphim, I'm not sure what they were going for. A seraphim, it's like the highest angel. So maybe it was the work of angels, but that's for something called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD. Paroxetine, Paxil, and then Paxil controlled release. So again, another medication that works a little bit longer. Then we have the serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, and I'll try to do a little better job with my writing here. Serotonin norepinephrine, and I'll abbreviate it NE, reuptake inhibitor. Okay. And so we're just affecting different neurotransmitters, where selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor was just serotonin. Now we're talking about serotonin and norepinephrine. Again, the oxetine, be careful with that. It's supposed to indicate a SSRI. Cymbalta. So my mnemonic was to remember that cymbal players would always seem to be happy. And alta means above in Spanish, so higher mood maybe. Then the faxine is the stem here in venlafaxine, and for Effexor. So that's a way to remember that one. The TCA. So this SNRI and SSRI are both named after neurotransmitters. But amitriptyline is named after, or the tricyclic antidepressant is named after the 3 rings. So you can see that TRI in the stem, triptyline, and Elavil elevates your mood. Isocarboxazid didn't have a stem that I saw, but I had a student that said I so carve boxes, and it just seemed very sad. So it's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So mono, M-O-N-O, A-M-I-N-E, and oxidase inhibitor. And what that monoamine really means is that we're still kind of going back to serotonin, which is a monoamine, and that we're affecting it. We're just calling it by a different name. Smoking cessation. So bupropion was first an antidepressant, it was Wellbutrin, so ideally you would get well, or get out of the rut you're in. So you see the RUT and then IN in there. But then they found that a lot of these antidepressants stop smoking. They said, oh, this is great. Let's make it an anti-smoking drug. So they renamed it Zyban, or repackaged it that way. Varenicline, it's Chantix. So the Nacline stem indicates a smoking cessation medication. And I had a student that said in a southern accent, well, when I take varenicline, I'm very inclined to quit. So, or with Chantix, it's my chant is that I don't need my fix. So anyway, it just stuck in my head. Okay, so these are antidepressants, all the way down to bupropion, which can also be used for smoking cessation. Then varenicline is specifically a smoking cessation medication. Next, we're going to go on to some anti-anxiety, then ADHD medications, and antipsychotics as well. So the first thing with the benzodiazepines is that on a lot of YouTube channels, you'll see LAM and PAM are stems, and that's just incorrect. You want to be careful because there's a drug lamotrigine, which is an anti-epileptic, and there's verapamil, which is a calcium channel blocker, and that's for high blood pressure. Those are not benzodiazepines. So use the whole stem, azolam or azapam. Xanax has part of the word anxiety in it, so easy enough to remember. Versed, I can't remember the verse you just said. Klonopin and clonazepam are very similar. And then Ativan, I don't even remember what I used for that one. So, but really stick with the generic stems. That's what you want to use for the benzodiazepines. Dexmethylphenidate, methylphenidate, I couldn't really find a stem for them, but you can see with the brand names what they're for. So these are stimulant Schedule 2s for ADHD. They can help you focus, Focalin, or they can help you concentrate, and they just kind of turn the last couple letters around there. Non-stimulant ADHD medication, so atomoxetine, again we see this oxetine stem. This does not mean it's an SSRI. You have to memorize that it's a non-stimulant ADHD medication. Strattera can straighten out your attention. Bipolar is a simple salt, so lithium and lithobid, so BID, bisin D is the Latin for twice daily. Lithium was taken twice daily in this particular dose. First generation antipsychotics, there's also a term called, so these would be the typical, TYPICAL, antipsychotics. And then when we get to second generations, are atypical. But we don't usually use antipsychotic as a term because to say someone is psychotic is just not a nice way of saying it. So usually we say anti-schizophrenic. So chlorpromazine was the first one that came out. It's Thorazine. And this is low potency. That's important because the low potency drugs tend to cause sedation, and low potency just means that you need 100 milligrams to get the same thing out of chlorpromazine as 2 milligrams of haloperidol, which is high potency, can do. So the haloperidol has the peridol stem, and a lot of students think of the halo to remind them, or the halo and haloperidol, to remind them that this is high potency, first generation antipsychotic, but you can also replace first generation with typical anti-schizophrenic. So that's first generation, some of the drugs for anxiety, ADHD, bipolar, and psychoses. Let's look at the second generation antipsychotics and the anti-epileptics. So the second generation antipsychotics, the peridone and risperidone and the haloperidol and haldol are very similar. Somebody said that the risper sounds like whispers, so like you're hearing the whispering voices. Quetiapine, if you change this T and I and then put the I over one and kind of turn it around, you end up with quiet. So quiet the voices, but the stem is tiapine. And that's Seroquel. To quell something is to calm something down. So risperidone, quetiapine are both second generation antipsychotics. We would also call these atypical. Why is that important? Atypical antipsychotics have less extrapyramidal symptoms, but would have more dyslipidemia. More dyslipidemia, diabetes, weight gain, things like that in general. Again, you want to generalize too much. There's certainly variation within the class. Anti-epileptics, we break them down into traditional versus newer. So we've got carbamazepine, and I think I missed a B there. Carbamazepine. And the pene just means that we have some kind of, I think it's a tricyclic molecule. But the way to maybe remember it is that you carb or curb the convulsions, or you control them. So you see the T, the R, the O, and the L. That could be from the word control. That's one way to look at it. Divalproex is Depakote, second traditional one. And then phenytoin has the toin, T-O-I-N, stem, and this is Dilantin. And you would want to remember it from the toin stem. The newer ones, now I only just happen to pick two drugs that happen to have GAB in them. GAB is a stem. It's for that gamma aminobutyric acid. And gabapentin is Neurontin, and you can think of the NEU, which is pronounced new, as the newer antiepileptic. And then Lyrica also is a newer one. Lyrica, so if something's lyric, it's musical, so we're taking this very disordered epilepsy and making it more ordered, so that's one way to think of it. Parkinson's disease, so dopamine, or lack thereof, is a real problem. So levodopa goes, you can't put dopamine in the brain directly, the blood-brain barrier will block it, but levodopa can, as a precursor, get into the brain and then be converted to dopamine. But we lose so much as we get there. So carbidopa is really there as a protectant to protect levodopa, allow more of it to enter the brain. The gilene stem, so selegiline, that's an MAO. B, it's elderpril. And so you can see the word elderly in there, that Parkinson's affects many elderly people. But certainly it affects younger people as well. That's highlighted in a couple movies, and then the actor Michael J. Fox certainly. So that's Parkinson's, and then let's look at just our last two here, Alzheimer's and motion sickness. Alzheimer's, donepezil. The way that I remembered it was my memory is done. I can't remember zilch and just put Z-I-L-C-H. Or you can think of perception and aricept, and maybe you lose some degree of perception. Memantine, the MEM from memory, tends to ring a bell. But then Namenda has the NMDA, and that's what kind of receptor it affects. The last medication is motion sickness, so scopolamine is transderm scope, so across trans, derm, skin, scope, and then taking the first four letters of scopolamine. This is usually used for cruise ships and things like that. Person puts on a patch and they don't have to keep taking Dramamine or something like that. That's neuro in a nutshell.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com. In print, ebook, and audiobook.